Welcome to the first Healthcare Startup Meetup happening today. And so cool that actually so many people showed up. This is obviously the first time this is happening, so all of this is kind of like highly experimental, and things might not work out properly, but we'll try our best to make things work really well and make this really interesting. As a quick note before I start, we want to record this and put this on YouTube later because there were a lot of people who actually asked me whether there would be a recording available, as they couldn't make it right now, but would still like to watch the talk of Leander, especially later. So if you're not okay with that, simply mute yourself and turn off your video and just don't interact with us, and then you obviously also won't end up in the final video. All right, with that out of the way, let me walk you through what our plan was actually for today. So the topic for today is Building AI for Radiology, and my guest is Leander, but I'll be talking about Leander a bit more slightly later. So the rough plan for today is that we have a very brief introduction. This is what we're doing right now. So we're here. We'll have Leander's talk after that, which will be approximately 20 minutes, but not super sure about that, might be a bit shorter. And then I think the biggest value of today's session could actually be a Q&A session with Leander and a discussion with him. And I'll walk you through how that will work in a bit. So you will have the opportunity to ask all of your questions to Leander and discuss them with him. And after that, if you're still up for that, you can meet random people in breakout rooms. So then we'll break up the whole group into breakout rooms, and you can talk in smaller groups and introduce yourself and talk about the problems you're facing in your healthcare startups or the ideas you might be having for healthcare companies. I'm kind of aware that breakout rooms are not really as great as in-person networking. Actually, personally, I don't like them that much, but I kind of thought I also don't want to skip it. I want to try it out today just because we have so many people and it actually could be a great opportunity. So if you're not interested in the breakout rooms, you can simply leave after the Q&A with Leander. But if you're interested, just stay on with me and the others, and we'll try it out and see if it's fun. All right, moving forward. Oh yeah, this meetup is actually sponsored by us, Open Regulatory. So a lot of you already know us. So I actually won't go into too much detail here. Our website is openregulatory.com, and the idea is that we help startups enter the market, especially when it comes to medical device compliance, which generally is a field full of very bad consultants and very expensive things you can buy, consultants and templates and software, and we try to solve all of those things. So I won't be talking too much about that. I just have these 4 bullet points. We provide free templates for medical device compliance. We provide free software for getting compliance done faster. It also has some paid versions. We provide a free Slack community for regulatory questions, 800 plus people from startups in it right now. And we provide consulting, which is 30 to 50% cheaper and 2 to 4 times faster than others. And our goal is that if we do our job well, that we'll be unemployed because you no longer need regulatory consultants, right? You don't need a consultant to buy a car or to use public transport because it's kind of easy and obvious. And the same should hopefully be true with regulatory compliance once we're done. And you can find us at openregulatory.com. All right. Regarding the Q&A session with Leander later, we'll be using the Google Meet feature for that. So you can already start answering questions you might have now if you already have questions before Leander has said a word, by clicking on this fancy icon thing in the bottom right corner with these symbols, and then clicking on Q&A, and that will enable you to enter your question. You can also enter it anonymously, and then people can vote on questions. So if you have any questions about that, write it in the chat, but I think it's intuitive to use once you've actually found the menu entry. All right, so with that out of the way, the next point is Leander's talk. It was actually kind of funny because I thought for the first episode of this meetup, do I kind of ask Leander because Leander is such an interesting person and actually one of the best speakers I could think of. But I thought, okay, screw it, let's ask the best one I can think of right now and just hope that enough people show up. So I was actually checking Leander's LinkedIn page just earlier today, and I actually noticed a few crazy things. But I mean, the most important thing to note here is that he's essentially one of the co-founders of Floy, which is a radiology AI startup. probably one of the best known radiology AI startups in Germany, at least to my knowledge. They've raised like quite a lot of money, got a lot of publicity, grown their team by a lot, and have, according to their own like the information they put out, deployed their software in quite a lot of doctors' practices and hospitals already. But I think Leander himself is also an interesting person. I always thought he was a technical person because he writes code. But the slightly funny thing is, I think he actually didn't study anything technical. So he studied, as far as I remember, business and psychology. And he actually started studying during high school when he was 16 years old. So I think a lot of those things are really exciting. But anyway, now he's at Floy, and I'm looking forward to what he has to share today. So Leander, the virtual stage is yours, and I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can.
That is amazing, and thank you so much for the warm words. And I feel a bit uncomfortable right now. And also great to see so many amazing people here, also familiar people. Like, I mean, I see Tobias and Nicolas and a bunch of other people, like Christopher saw also. So it's really cool. Like we bring all this community together for, of course, a higher purpose towards building cool technology that actually helps patients and doctors alike. And through the session, of course, we'll share a bit of the story of Floy, and of course, just personal learnings that we've made. And as usual, take everything with a grain of salt. It's our experience. There's always a lot of luck involved, and I forgot that. And just be very critical at the end. And of course, I really want to make it as useful as possible for everyone of you. So, like, really feel free to ask questions. I think Oliver mentioned the Q&A part. Also, just just raise your hands, interrupt me. It doesn't matter. Put stuff into the chat. We can also talk about something off topic if the slides are boring. Really focusing on making it as useful as possible. But and also thank you so much, of course, for the open regulatory team, especially Oliver, for hosting all of these and bringing everyone together, and of course making regulatory compliance sort of more intuitive and less annoying in certain ways. This will not be a talk about regulatory compliance, of course. It will touch certain things, but without further ado, let's just go ahead. In case something is off from a connection point of view, just ping me or Oliver. I think you can moderate pretty well. It's all about moving fast in highly regulated environments. And giving you a study background of Floy, we are building Radiology AI, but with a bit of a hinge towards patient-centric Radiology AI. We started roughly 2.5 years ago, raised roughly 9 million euros in venture capital so far. And my co-founder, as you can see here, we look like 15, and I wouldn't really deny that one. You might also ask a very good question: how did you end up in medicine, healthcare, when we both went essentially to business school? And that is indeed a very good question. The story behind that is that my co-founder himself faced some, let's say, in radiological diagnostics, something which led to a bit of, let's say, additional surgeries which could have been prevented. And from my side, I'm just really passionate on the entire field of like quantified self, biohacking, just taking like human beings to the next level. And I think it's a really good combination of combining something very concrete, because radiology in the end is the mother of diagnostics. Everything has to go through it, about making images and interpreting from that part, but combining some, let's say, a bit of a larger version with something very concrete, very hands-on. We have around 31 Florianas right now, which is pretty amazing across nationalities. Really happy with the team. And just to give you a glimpse of what we're doing, like this is, for example, like a CT image, and usually these come to like 200-300 different images. It's super hard for doctors, radiologists to basically look through them. They only have limited time, 6-7 minutes, and finding basically things that might be abnormal. And what we've done so far over the last 2.5 years is developing AI devices that basically helps radiologists to see things that might be of interest to them. And of course, one thing that we do a bit differently, which also will be part of, let's say, later on, is that we do, based on our, let's say, quite an external view, quite a few things differently, but that is something for later. About startups and medical technology. Startups are hard. They're insanely hard. And I kind of knew it before it, but like I didn't really expect to be that hard. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but especially, of course, medical technology, I think, is like playing the startup game, but on like extreme mode. And there's been probably not even one, or maybe for several times, where I was wondering, like, why am I doing that? I'm not picking something easier. But in the end, when you see like positive feedback from patients or doctors, or like really seeing how things can impact people's lives, I think it's always motivation enough. And the challenging part about startups, but especially medical technology, is like you either start with some technologies always like from bench to bedside. So you have maybe some really cool technology because you did a PhD in that sense, you're a medical doctor and you saw some problems and you really want to change the world in a certain way. The hard part is going from this technology level or science level to what's actually implementing into routine clinical care that doctors or patients can use on a day-to-day basis. And in normal stabilingular, like you have to like hit 3 of these things. You need to make it feasible. The technology needs to work. And especially in AI, the challenging part is that it doesn't have to work on your data set, but kind of like on any data that's out there, any kind of patients, it needs to be generalizable. It needs to be desirable, meaning people need to want to use it. So if you have something super clunky, old-fashioned UI, it's slow, it's ugh, or it doesn't really solve your problems, people won't use it for a very good reason. And that is, of course, also quite hard to do it because doctors particularly can be quite peculiar when it comes to their taste. And one really overlooked part is the entire part of viability. In the end, it needs to be something where you as an organization can generate revenues to cover up your costs, because in the end, you need to pay people, you need to pay compute, you need to pay research, clinical studies. And I think from my experience, when talking to researchers, people getting started in the medical AI field or like startups in general, in the healthcare field, that's oftentimes forgotten because this is already so freaking hard getting technology right and getting like the product and the compliance part right that everyone is like, okay, as long as I build this technology and as long as like somebody's going to use it, of course, health insurance are going to reimburse me. Of course, somebody's going to pay for that. But this is often the case, and which is a bit sad. And I really can encourage you also to think from that perspective as well. And that's kind of what we started with Floy, because there have been a lot of radiology AI companies out there before us. And they did some really good job. I mean, Oliver worked for one with Vara, and they did some really good technology and went also through the regulatory approval process. I think the hard part is monetizing in a way that allows you to have a sustainable business. And what we do differently at Floy is that we didn't start out by selling to doctors, but rather partner with radiologists to offer patients in outpatient imaging centers like an additional AI support. That can be, for example, when you walk in and you get something like a CT scan of the thorax for any lung infections. That right now we are building a product that can look, for example, to your bones and early diagnose or predict the bone density, so like an early detection of osteoporosis, which really affects quite a few people. And of course, in order to make that one happen, you also need to hit the compliance part, the regulations, which can, especially in the beginning, be really like a big jungle and can be very intimidating, but more to that later. So startups are hard, but technology is really hard. So, but I still can congratulate on showing interest in that regard, and perhaps if you're already building in that sense, going through it, because in the end, it's something that really creates value. In the end, it's not just like some fancy application that comes and goes, but something that has a lasting, hopefully, effect on people's lives. And playing that part and figuring that one out, one important thing is that, or like a really interesting model to think about this entire market is like the map is not the territory, and why speed is important. When you go hiking and you want to climb a big mountain or like across like a river, and you have an incomplete map or wrong map, you will get stuck and you will have to take a lot of detours and this and this and this, and it might get even dangerous. You might not be coming back. And the same happens when you start building in healthcare or the medical AI, because you think something is going to happen, you have assumptions, how people are going to use your product, what's important, how people are going to react to that part, but your map is incomplete. And getting like a quite an accurate map to later on plan the path accordingly is, I think, one of the most important things. But of course, you're doing something novel. You're walking a path which has been like, untapped before. You're a pioneer in the field. So the question is, how do you get like an accurate map and know really how to navigate and what to do and what not to do? And the problem is not always like building a wrong product. Like, that's not a problem. The problem is finding out too late when you run out of money or like you already burned your reputation. So as you all probably might be familiar with the lean startup cycle, it's all about building something, measuring how people like interact with that part and learning from these insights. The main challenge in medical or building for health tech is that you oftentimes have a big stop sign in between, which is the regulatory approval part. Because you build technology, you know, bring it to market, but you have then get all the documentation ready and hand it over to some notified body who might be also completely overwhelmed because of certain regulatory changes, and you may be building something that the world has seen so far, so they also like experience, and that can take easily 12 to 14 to 18 to 24 months. And that's a big problem. That's why the speed is so important of getting like you map accurately of the of the territory, and you can really build something that actually solves the problem people want to use. So next couple of minutes, we're going to dive into 3 things that might be important for actually helping you to get to the speed of making that happen. And I think the first part is like starting really, really, really small and building momentum from there. Oftentimes, when you're really passionate about a problem because you've seen in the clinical care, or like you built some really cool technology, you tend to you want to build the perfect product from day one. But that's impossible to do. And something that can do everything from day one is a lot more complex. And you also have like additional complexity by if you don't have one feature, but actually 5 features, and they interact with each other and have different interdependencies, which makes things basically impossible to really ensure safety. Because especially when it comes to regulatory compliance and making sure that everything is having a benefit and working well, you want to make it as easy as possible for any auditor to understand what you're doing, making sure that it's safe, they don't really end up in jail because you maybe broke the law, and making it happen. And but it also at the same time really like slows down, you can cut down development time a lot. And that's what we did. So we went exactly from, we started in August, like we raised our funding round in July 2021. So we basically started beginning of August. And within 4.5 months, we went from 0 to having a product. We actually pivoted the product in between, completed like the entire technical implementation and quality management system, and had our audit in beginning of January. It was a super intense time, I can tell you. We were like just moving to Munich, had basically rented a flat. Our office was our living room. And my co-founder and our first hire, we basically lived in the flat. And I think one of my co-founder, I think he didn't even leave the flat for like 2 weeks at a certain amount of time. So it was really like working 14, 18 hours a day, just making it work. But at the same time, it really forced us to get things done. And one of the really important things that helped us to achieve that was that before we even started doing anything, we set the audit date with our notified body. So that was fixed. And if you wouldn't have like missed that audit date, we probably would have delayed the entire approval process by like 6, 8, 10 months, so on and so forth, because they were completely out of capacity. So it kind of like we had this external forcing function helping us to think smaller, which might not be the case anyways. But overall, I think one of the big learnings is, and also from follow-up projects, starting really, really small, not thinking too big, helps you to build a safer device, a simpler device, and getting to market as quickly as possible, because that's where you need to make the learnings. The second part, which is also something that Oliver is evangelizing quite a lot, is that this entire compliance regulatory part, it's entirely like hard to understand. You read like a legal text, you're gonna be like, oh my goodness, what am I getting into? But of course, one of the main things, especially as your founder or working in regulatory affairs, is that it's a teamwork in the end, and it requires multiple people from a clinical side, from an AI development side, from a product management, or like even business side, to bring work together to bring something to market. And there's always a way of how people want to work, and then of course how you kind of like should work according to these standards. And I probably spent like the first 1.5 years, maybe like 60-70% of my time just understanding like what people want, what regulatory affairs, like what regulators want to make basically everything as simple as possible with a minimum amount of labor involved to develop the product, or also like any documentation required. So one example is that in our team, like engineers love to use Jira. So like we build a lot of these features, like things we need to document in Jira. Or another really important thing is that instead of like having a lot of manual work involved, which nobody likes doing, how can we, for example, automate things and move more towards continuous compliance? And of course, people familiar with the engineering part know that it's GitHub Actions, and it's not exactly what we should do. And of course, there's still like a long way ahead of us. But moving towards making things as seamless as possible, as minimal as possible, still of course fulfilling the requirements, is really, really important. And it often starts with language, because sometimes they talk about soups, which is like software of unknown provenance, and everyone's gonna be like, what is that? Like, I'm not hungry kind of way. But yeah, translating into, well, that's a third-party library you're going to use in your list of package you use when you import Python. You're going to be, okay, makes a lot of sense. And being able to translate them is super important. I think one of the most high impact value activities you can do. And the third part to make that happen is, of course, hiring or building a style team that just enjoys the challenge, enjoys the hard work. And that was a picture we've taken, I think, in July last year. So right now we are completely remote, like people across different continents even. And but twice a year we do like a retreat. In this case, we had a beautiful finca rented out in Barcelona, near Barcelona, where we took a nice drone picture. And all of them are just like incredibly passionate about the topic, super mission driven, putting in 60, 70, 80 hours like each week to move things forward. And the hard part really is that how do you attract these people and how do you like keep them? And of course, like our person did like a lot of mistakes in that regard, in terms of like getting the right people involved, keeping them, make them happy. I think the most important thing is that shaping like an environment where they can really like leverage their strengths and interests. If there's an ML engineer and he's really interested in, I don't know, like just like building models, developing models, and he doesn't really care about the documentation part, well, how can I help you to basically take this burden off you if you don't like doing it or not particularly good at it because you don't enjoy it? Or if you're somebody like involved in like, I need to plan the software development, they're not really interested in the risk management part, you can take it over. That's why like my, I think it's already mentioned, my unofficial title is like Chief Plumber, because in the end, like I go where the like shit hits the fan, and we just have to make things work. But in the end, building like a really amazing team, which is like also incredibly rewarding. And one of the big benefits that you guys have when building in healthcare is that you really attract people who are not in for the money, but rather for the mission itself and making things work. And I think it's just challenging, but at the same time also incredibly rewarding to get there. And last but not least, I just want to give like a quick outlook on, I think, where the world is moving towards, especially in AI. And of course, you all have observed what's happening in right now with the whole ChatGPT stuff, and of course the base models of GPT 3.5 and 4, and people building a lot of, let's say, things ahead. And always like I think a rule of thumb is that what happens in like the industry, it takes maybe 2 to 3 years to translate into actual medical part, because by definition we're a bit more conservative. We have to be more conservative, which is good, because we can't just play around with new stuff just because it looks cool, but because there's always like a safety aspect involved, and like taking a risk-based approach. But what I would love to see in the future is, besides of course a shift towards regulatory like continuous compliance, is that there's so much untapped potential, so many problems right now in healthcare when it comes to doctors spending 3-4 hours a day on documentation, doing a lot of manual work, misdiagnosis, mistreatments, things are just like so inefficient. And in the end, of course, AI has a huge potential towards augmenting humans and helping patients also maybe to understand their health a lot better. Is that building towards having also like a foundational approach, like maybe a base model to not scale regulators, that is actually a certified medical device. And what I would love to see as well at some point is that having that as a medical device, which then other people can build on. And in fact, that's what we're right now doing with Floy. So the last 2.5 years, we've been very narrow on having one model for one body part for one task, and gain some experience, made a lot of learnings. But of course, one thing that's happening in background right now, besides of course the cooperation part, is that actually training such model for radiology, of course, starting with a limited scope. And seeing how we can certify that's going to be a big challenge, because it's never been done before, I think, worldwide so far. But then also at some point, perhaps enabling you guys, if you're interested in this entire field, to maybe build like specific, I don't know, like smaller models, adapters for specific diseases. Because if we have like a radiology-based model, which is really familiar with the images, the anatomy, physical processes or physiological processes, you can ideally, of course, build something in significant less time, focus on one single task as we did in the past beforehand. So that's of course an untapped challenge. If it's possible from a technical part, we don't know. If it's possible from a regulatory point of view, we also don't know. But I think the task itself is so important to not do it. So yeah, also very curious if you guys have any experience in that field, or like are looking for something in this regard, to like share some ideas, or to share feedback or share your thoughts in this regard, so we can all of course move towards the same goal of happy patients, happy doctors. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I hope you took something away from that. If you have any questions, of course, now perfect time to ask, or comments. But of course, if you don't feel comfortable doing or don't have time to do it, I'm always available via email, and I think Oliver as well. Just reach out to us, and of course, happy to have conversations and share knowledge, of course, on a one-to-one basis.